In a small town resting beside the stone walls of a grand palace, there lived a boy named Rohan. The town was always full of noise. Children ran through dusty streets, merchants shouted in the markets, and the clang of metal from the blacksmith's shop echoed all day long. Everyone seemed to compete to be the loudest voice in the crowd. But Rohan was different. While other boys bragged about their strength and shouted during their games, Rohan spoke very little. He listened more than he talked. When others argued, he simply watched. When people laughed loudly, he smiled quietly. Many people in the town did not understand him. "Why are you always so silent?" one boy asked him one afternoon. Rohan only shrugged softly. Another boy laughed. "Maybe he doesn't know how to speak." Soon the teasing became common. Whenever the boys gathered in the town square, someone would always point at Rohan and say, "Look, it's the quiet one. Say something, Rohan!" Or did the wind steal your voice? The others would burst into laughter. But Rohan never shouted back. He never argued. He simply looked at them with calm eyes and walked away. Deep inside, he understood something they did not. Noise does not make a person strong. Days passed like this. Most afternoons, when the town became too loud, Rohan would walk to the river that flowed beyond the market. The water moved slowly there, reflecting the sky like a mirror. He would sit on a flat stone and watch the ripples spreading across the surface. Sometimes birds landed near the shore. Sometimes the wind whispered through the tall grass. Rohan liked those quiet moments. In silence, he noticed things other people missed. He saw how the fish moved against the current. He noticed how clouds changed shape slowly above the hills. He listened to the rhythm of the river. To him, silence was not empty. Silence was full of answers. One bright morning, the peaceful routine of the town suddenly changed. The loud beat of royal drums echoed through the streets. People rushed out of their homes. Merchants left their stalls. Children stopped their games and ran toward the town square. The king had arrived. He rode a tall white horse, wearing armor that shone like the sun. Behind him marched soldiers carrying long spears and banners that waved proudly in the wind. Beside the king, one soldier held a heavy wooden chest decorated with gold. The crowd buzzed with excitement. What is happening? Why has the king come here? The king raised his hand, and the noise slowly faded. "My people," he announced, his voice powerful and clear, "our kingdom needs young minds that are wise, patient, and strong." He pointed to the chest. Inside it were hundreds of glittering gold coins. Gasps spread through the crowd. "I will hold a challenge," the king continued. "The boy who proves himself worthy will serve in my palace under my royal advisor, and he will receive this chest of gold." The square exploded with whispers. Every boy in the town wanted that treasure. They imagined new homes for their families, warm clothes for winter, and enough food to last years. The king raised 3 fingers. "There will be 3 tests." The boys gathered in a line, proud and confident. Rohan stood quietly at the back. One boy noticed him and laughed. "Why are you here? You never even speak." Another smirked. "Maybe he thinks he can win by staying silent." The boys laughed again. Rohan said nothing. The first test took place beside the wide river outside the town. The water flowed quickly over slippery stones. "There are no boats," the king's advisor explained. "You must find your own way across." The signal was given. Immediately, the boys rushed forward. Some jumped straight into the water, splashing wildly. Others tried to run across the rocks. But the current was stronger than they expected. One boy slipped and fell. Another shouted when the water pushed him sideways. Several struggled to keep their balance. The river became loud with panic and chaos. Rohan remained on the shore. He watched the water carefully. He noticed the places where the current slowed near large stones. He saw a line of rocks forming a natural path. After a quiet moment, he stepped forward. One careful step, then another. He moved slowly, feeling the strength of the water around his feet. He did not rush. He did not panic. While others splashed and struggled, Rohan walked calmly across the river. When he reached the other side, his clothes were barely wet. The king's advisor raised his eyebrows. "This boy observes before he acts," he murmured. Many boys finally stumbled across the river, tired and soaked. Rohan stood quietly among them. The second test was held in the king's royal garden. The garden was enormous, filled with hundreds of green plants and colorful flowers. "Hidden somewhere here," the advisor said, "is a rare white flower. You have 15 minutes to find it." The moment the signal sounded, the boys ran everywhere. They pushed branches aside, pulled leaves from bushes, and shouted directions to each other. The garden quickly became noisy and chaotic. Rohan stayed where he was. He looked around slowly. Then he noticed something small but important: butterflies. Several butterflies were fluttering toward a quiet corner of the garden where the plants grew thick and undisturbed. Rohan followed them calmly. He pushed aside a few leaves. There it was, a delicate white flower glowing softly in the sunlight. He picked it gently and walked back toward the king. When he presented it, the judges stared in surprise. "How did you find it so quickly?" one asked. Rohan answered quietly, "When everything becomes loud, the truth hides. But when you stay silent, nature shows the way." The final test took place in the royal hall. Tall pillars rose toward the ceiling. Torches flickered along the walls. The king sat on his golden throne. One by one, the boys stepped forward. The king asked a single question: "What is stronger than a sword yet makes no sound?" The first boy answered proudly, "Gold." The king shook his head. Another boy said, "Power." Again the king shook his head. "Knowledge," one shouted. "Courage," said another. Each answer was wrong. Finally, Rohan stepped forward. The hall grew quiet. The king repeated the question. Rohan closed his eyes for a moment. Then he spoke softly. "Patience, my king." The king leaned forward. "Explain." Rohan lifted his head. "A sword can win battles," he said, "but patience wins hearts. A sword can cut through enemies, but patience can heal broken trust." He paused. "A sword creates fear, but patience creates respect. And respect lasts longer than fear." Silence filled the hall. The king slowly stood up. Then he began to clap. "Wisdom," he declared, "does not shout, it speaks with truth." The next morning, the entire town gathered once again in the square. The king's messenger unrolled a long scroll. The winner of the king's challenge and the one chosen to serve in the royal palace. People held their breath. "Is Rohan, the quiet boy?" The crowd gasped. Some boys stared in disbelief. "That can't be right. He barely speaks." But an old village elder smiled gently. "Sometimes," the elder said, "the one who listens the most understands the most." From that day forward, Rohan lived in the palace. He studied under the royal advisor. He learned about leadership, justice, and wisdom. Years passed. Rohan rarely spoke during meetings. But whenever he did, the entire room listened. Because his words were never careless. They were thoughtful. They were calm. They were powerful. Eventually, people across the kingdom spoke about him. Not as the loudest man, but as the wisest. And the same boys who once laughed at him now told their children about the quiet boy who had earned the king's trust. Because sometimes the world believes strength must be loud. But the greatest strength often moves in silence. And sometimes the quietest voice carries the deepest truth.